So, good morning everybody. Lovely to see so many faces in the audience. My name is Anna Palmer and I am Scientific Services Manager for Darwin Healthcare, which is an agency that has an office in London and an office just south of Oxford. My brief from Peter today was to talk in general about the medical communications business and about medical communications agencies in general. I was told not to make it Darwin specific, but to keep it nice and general and informative for you guys. I've got about 20 minutes. I'm going to try and keep my eye on the clock and not to take too long. So this is what I want to run through quickly with you today. What MedComms is, my journey into medical communications, medical communications versus the other types of agencies that you might come across when you're searching for jobs on the internet, what we actually do on a day-to-day basis, the role of the medical writer, the role of the account management team, and finally, what other roles there are within MedComms apart from writing and account management. I had a little brainstorm all on my own and came up with my definition for medical communications. And I came up with the fact that it was communication of medical or scientific information to healthcare professionals, by which I mean doctors, nurses, anyone who can prescribe drugs or anyone who's involved in the periphery, pharmacists, for example. And the communication is most often around a particular disease or a specific drug, and generally we're working on behalf of a pharmaceutical company. And that's, in my mind, where the term medical communications comes from. And if you want to make it even simpler still, we're basically thinking about a pharmaceutical company who's very anxious to speak to a GP about their new treatment. For instance, they've got a new migraine treatment. They don't really quite know how to do it. The answer's very simple. They need to go out and hire a medical communications agency. How did I get here? It's probably interesting for you to know who on earth I am and what my route here was, because I've spoken to a couple of you and I know that you have you're at lots of different areas in your career. Some of you are probably at a PhD level, starting a PhD, finishing a PhD. Some of you are postdocs. I started at Cardiff University and did a biochemistry degree. I then went on and did a PhD in physiology. I spent 5 years as a postdoc, at which point I spotted a job for medical writer, was quite intrigued, and I started my first medical writing job. And then focusing more specifically about my career in medical communications, I spent my first 3 years as a medical writer in one specific company. And then I moved to my first medical communications agency as a medical writer. I was promoted to senior medical writer, moved to another agency as a senior medical writer, then became a scientific team leader, and then my job at the moment, the scientific services manager. A lot of you are probably thinking, how long does that take? What can I expect? What kind of career progression can I expect within MedComms? So I've just put some timelines along the side there to give you an idea, and you can see that my journey through medical communications for me has taken about 10 years, if that helps at all. One of the things you may find, and I certainly find nowadays, if I ever have a look on in monster.com or something, you might type in medical writer and all kinds of different agencies will crop up. Medical communications is one of many specialties allied to pharmaceutical companies. So a pharmaceutical company may employ a medical communications agency to help them talk to doctors, but what you'll find is that they also employ an awful lot of other agencies. And I think it's just quite interesting for you to understand, or just to have an awareness of some of those different companies. So these are the kind of things that I'm thinking about: digital specialists, market access, Peter's already talked about, public relations, PR agencies, where they're sending out press releases to patients, clinical research organizations that will organize all of the scientific data and turn them into clinical study results. There are specific advertising agencies, marketing agencies, branding agencies that will put together all of the branding around new drugs to make them look glossy and appealing. If you ever look through a paper journal, I know it's all a bit online these days, but you might see a nice full-page glossy advert for a new drug. And that's the kind of thing that branding and advertising agencies will get involved in. And you'll also come across some kind of agency names or terms that, quite frankly, they mean absolutely nothing to me and they'll mean nothing to you as well. So be prepared to come across a little bit of gobbledygook and don't worry too much about it. Why do pharmaceutical companies want to employ so many agencies? If we think about development of a new drug, it's an extremely costly and complicated process. This slide just gives a little snapshot. We've said there that the cost of launching a new medicine could be about £1 billion. It's big bucks to develop new medicines. And of course, as we all know, the returns, if you get a blockbuster drug, can be phenomenal. But within all these stages, as a drug goes through the early discovery phases, through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and it's finally approved, at all of those points, the pharmaceutical company may need different partners, specialist partners, to help them through this process. And we need to remember as well that all of this money invested, only a few of the drugs that are tested finally make it to the market. So it's also quite a risky business. So I thought I'd just put a little example together to show you how all these different agencies fit together. Let's imagine there's a drug called Hedilin. I didn't Google this, so it might already exist. I don't think it does. Let's say this drug has completed phase 3 trials and there are fabulous results, and the pharmaceutical company are trying to get it approved for use in migraine. So an example scenario of how all these companies might fit together. You can see just above my head here, we've got the medical communications company, someone like myself and my colleagues who will be employed to think about different ways to educate prescribers and the key supporting medical staff. They'll employ other agencies. They may employ market research agencies to interview doctors. We've talked about digital. They might want their headlin.com website and they might think they want a very specialized digital agency to do that. They might talk to market access guys because they really want to think about ways of getting their drug into pharmacies and on pharmacy shelves. They might want to tell the press. They might want to speak to regulatory agencies to prepare the study data for submission, and so on and so forth. So just to be aware that there's lots of different terminology, lots of different agencies out there, and all of them sit together. There's an awful lot of overlap, and medical communication is a term that will probably come up in quite a few of them. Full service agency is a term that you may well come across as well, and you may see it when you're browsing adverts for different agencies. It basically means they can do everything. A full service agency may say, yep, I can do digital, yep, I can do market access, yep, I can do med ed, we can do anything you want. And they may do that by having specialist divisions that deliver these services, or they may have sister companies that they work with. So you may see this kind of example where one company has different strands and they deliver different types of talent and speciality. So that's conceptually what MedComms is. It's the communication of medicine to doctors. You'll often hear the term med-ed as well, medical education or med-ed. And, you know, roughly speaking, it's kind of the same thing. It's medical education to healthcare professionals, generally on behalf of pharmaceutical companies. But what do we actually do on a day-to-day basis? I've had an interesting week already. I started the week in Wales. Yesterday I was in Paris. And this morning I was stuck in a traffic jam trying to get to the Botley roundabout. So it's kind of a typical week. One of the things we do that will be fairly familiar to you is publications. We do get involved with writing publications. The examples I've shown here are review articles where there will be several authors who are keen to write a review on their specialist subject. They simply don't have the time. So they will employ medical writers who can help them, who can take some of the pressure off. We'll do a lot of the actual writing, a lot of the research, and they will critically review it and input into it. We also get involved with original research, so we'll get all of the data and we'll work with the authors to produce an original manuscript. If you want to become a medical writer, you need to get used to the fact that you will no longer be an author. So if your drive in life is being the first author on a publication, maybe not for you. Instead, your name may well be found, if you're lucky, at the very back in the acknowledgements. We also get involved with a lot of conference or congress materials. I'm sure all of you have spent quite a bit of your careers already at conferences. Probably a lot of you have presented your data at conferences. We also get involved with that side of things. So we get involved with writing abstracts. If they're accepted, we get involved with preparing posters or the slides for the doctor to give their presentation. We also get involved with the more promotional side of congresses. I think if you've been to big congresses, you've seen the big exhibition halls where everybody comes to exhibit, talks to you about their wares. They may be pharmaceutical companies, they may be devices, and that kind of thing. We sometimes get involved with that. There'll be booths, and we'll create the material that's displayed on the booths. We're often involved with symposium. So if there's a big sponsored symposium, we'll probably be there in the background. We'll have helped with the slides. We'll have helped put that invitation that you get out of your bag and throw away. We probably spent months and months slaving over that. The audiovisual, the stage sets, the banners that are falling down at the sides that you don't even notice, all of that stuff will have been probably prepared by Medical Communications Agency. The symposium is one kind of meeting. We get involved with a lot of other meetings, standalone educational meetings, small advisory board meetings where the company wants to pick the doctor's brains. We'll help prepare those meetings and write up minutes. Big launch events when there's a new medicine that's launching, and so on and so forth. Other commercially focused materials, sometimes this falls into the remit of the advertising agencies that I spoke of, but some of it falls to us. As I mentioned, there's a lot of overlap. We may prepare internal training decks, so the staff of the pharmaceutical company may need to be trained on a new product that's just come out so that they can then talk to doctors. So we would prepare whatever was needed in terms of training materials, often slide decks, maybe brochures, so that they could get fully up to speed with the product, so that they could intelligently go out and talk to doctors and sell the new drug. So in a little more detail, what's the role of a medical writer? I just wanted to touch on terminology. You'll have seen from this slide earlier that as I've progressed through my career, my title has changed. You might expect your title to change as you become more senior in any job. But also be aware that the term medical writer is not used in every agency. Some agencies use a lot of different words, so you'll keep a lookout for those and don't be fooled. I used to be called a scientific specialist. I was a medical writer. Editorial team leader, you're a medical writer at a higher level, and so on and so forth. The role of the medical writer is varied. At the heart of it is obviously writing. It may not surprise you. Writing, researching and writing accurate, good quality scientific and medical copy is what you will spend the bulk of your time doing as a medical writer. Primarily we're working in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. It tends to be text or it tends to be slides predominantly. But you will also be involved with building relationships with clients and doctors. So it's a very much a people industry. It's very much about going out and talking to your clients, talking to the doctors, sharing knowledge and gathering knowledge. You'll need to work up an expert knowledge of your projects that you work on. So if you're working on a diabetes account, you'll be expected to give expert opinion on that account. You'll be expected to suggest new ideas. So once you've been involved with a particular client for a certain time, they'll look to you and say, look, this is the problem I've got. What do you suggest? How can we solve this problem? So you'll be looked up to as a problem solver as well. We have new business pitches sometimes when we want to go out and win new business or win a new account, and medical writers would be expected to contribute to that process. That means a lot of research. You may have a week to get to know a completely new therapy area, and you'll probably be expected to travel to the pitch and present as well. And also reviewing your fellow medical writers' work, and also taking responsibility of the work that goes out to client. You need to be prepared to say, yep, that's good enough to go, let's send it out. So having responsibility for your work. Not really any typical day for a medical writer. It's very varied. We've touched on a lot of these already. So one week won't generally look like another. You may have a few weeks where you don't leave your desk. You may have a couple of weeks where you're traveling around all over the place. So you need to be prepared to be quite flexible as a medical writer. In general, you need to be prepared to work to quite tight deadlines. You will need to put in some overtime on occasions, and other times you might have a nice 9 to 5 week. The client will spring ad hoc requests on you, so you need to be prepared to deal with them. And as I've already mentioned, guiding our clients. What are we looking for in a medical writer or a good medical writer? You need to have a science background. This can be quite varied. In my case, it was biochemistry. Biology is quite common, but it can vary from zoology, psychology. As long as it's science, you understand science and medicine, then there's a lot of flexibility there. A PhD is advantageous. Certain agencies, they will say you have to have a PhD. Others will be a little bit more flexible about it. And obviously, you need to enjoy writing and have a talent for it. You need to enjoy telling a story. You also need to have good attention to detail. We've mentioned problem solving, good desktop research skills. You must be able to absorb new concepts rapidly. We've talked about presentation skills as well. You will be expected to present. We've talked about people skills. We've talked about traveling. You also need to be able to take feedback very well. As a medical writer, everything we do, we tend to get one of our colleagues to review it and ensure that it's correct. So taking feedback well, I imagine, is probably not new to anybody in this room anyway, if you've been writing up PhDs, for example. In essence, a medical writer will be delivering what the client wants, on time and on budget. Account management is the other big role within a medical communications agency. And I'll just touch on this briefly, what we mean by account management. Again, terminology can be a bit of a barrier. We tend to talk about client services or account management. And some of the kind of job roles that will come with that are account executives or account managers and so forth. At Darwin, we call it client services, the CS or client services team. And my perspective may be slightly biased because I am a medical writer, is that the medical writer is at the heart of the business. The medical or scientific writing has to be of the greatest quality, but it can't stand on its own. And surrounding it, you have to have someone who's in charge of the finances, the timelines, who is the key contact for the client, and also understanding the commercial business and offering strategic advice. So the client services people will be involved in all of these peripheral tasks. They also generally have a good scientific knowledge. They'll understand the product, they'll understand the therapy area, they'll understand what the client's trying to do, and they will advise them, but they will also lead the team, make sure that timelines are kept to, make sure that the company's making money, and so on and so forth. And also they tend to be the key contact for the client. So I like to think that at the heart of most account teams, so if you have a client, there'll tend to be two people that the client will turn to. They will turn to the account manager in the first instance, but if they have a particular content issue, if they want to talk about a very a tricky scientific issue, they may well pick up the phone and talk to the medical writer direct. So those are the two key contacts in the typical agency team. It doesn't always work like that, but it tends to be the way. So the account management and the medical writing are at the heart of the team. If we were looking for a new account manager, we tend to look for someone who has a real interest in medicine and science, and they have to have that excellent attention to detail, financial skills, excellent communication skills. They have to be really well organized, a real team player, a real people's person. They'll tend to do also quite a lot of presentation, and they need to be able to understand product strategy and offer ideas. And again, they need to deliver what the client wants on time and on budget. Just to finish, a couple more slides. Why join a medical communications agency? There's a broad experience to be gained, both technical and creative. It's generally a fast-paced environment, and it's deadline-driven. It's quite a shock to the system moving out of academia into agency life because it is much quicker and quite a different feeling. There is the scope to progress quite rapidly. So if you're someone that's ambitious and wants to get to the top, then it's probably the right place for you. There's also a lot of opportunity for change and direction within the agency. So one of the ladies I work with at the moment, she started life as an editor which means that they're looking at all the grammar, the syntax and everything of what we write. If I write something, it's always edited, and the editor will nitpick, they'll look at commas, and they'll also rewrite it to make it flow better. So editors have a very specific role to play, and they'll proofread and so on and so forth. My colleague started as an editor, she moved on to be a medical writer, and then she flipped over and decided that she was much happier in client services. So now she is a client services director. So once you're within the agency world, you can see what works best for you. The other kind of opportunities are event management. Medical communications companies tend to run events, and they have a lot of logistics people. So if you want to be involved with booking hotels and talking to faculty, arranging travel, if you want to travel an awful lot, then that could be the role for you. There's often there's interactive and digital specialisms as well. And we also have a studio role within most medical communications, so graphic designers and that kind of thing. So if you have a real flair for art as well as science, that could also be an avenue for you. You also have the opportunity to work with global experts in their field. So the very top people in their field are the people that you'll often be interacting with and talking with, and that can be a real privilege and can be really fascinating, and you really get to the heart of therapy areas. And also you get to work in a range of therapy areas, which is also great, because having spent 10 years in cardiovascular disease, I found it a real breath of fresh air to come out of that, join an agency and be working on lots of different therapy areas that I previously knew nothing about. So that's quite liberating. And of course, there is the social side as well. Most agencies, I think you find, are quite social and have lots of social events as well, and tend to try and cultivate a real family feeling. And that is all I have to say.